Once again, on behalf of Kingsley Strategic Institute for Asia Pacific, whose chairman is here, Tan Sri Michael Liu, let me, on behalf of everyone, warm welcome to all participants, and especially to our distinguished panel of speakers today. Time is of the essence because our Deputy Chief Minister, Dato Amarong Tengah, will be coming after this to officiate this event. Thank you, KSI, for inviting me to chair once again this session. It's a good excuse for me to come to balik kampung, though not for good yet, because I still have a job to do in Kuala Lumpur. Hopefully one day I'll balik kampung for good. We have 5 distinguished panelists, varied experience and expertise. I think this will be quite interesting. The bottom line is that this summit hopefully will enable participants to feel the pulse of the Sarawak economy and the tempo of development in the state, which is fast catching up with other parts of the country, the more developed parts. It will provide timely updates on the state's plans and obtain feedback from the business communities and civil society. Let's create an impact. We have been through such sessions before, time and again. I think moving forward, our contributions today will help Sarawak to really develop, especially some experts on poverty here, quote unquote, Dr. Madeline and all this. She told me just now she would like to talk about poverty, and Yang Berhad, Kelvin, Dr. Kelvin, talking about urban poverty. Let's kick off. Our newly appointed Assistant Minister for Tourism, Arts and Culture, Yang Berhad Datuk Sebastian, Ting, Chiew. The next speaker will be Datuk Dr. Engineer Muhammad Abdul Karim bin Abdullah, also fellow Sarawakian. Yang Berhad Dr. Kelvin Lee Wuen. We are actually his guest here because this is his town. Although he came a bit later than us here, I just said maybe traffic jam as usual. Dr. Madeline Berma, Fellow Academy Sciences Malaysia and Commissioner in SUHAKAM, the Human Rights Commission. And the last speaker will be Dr. Arnold Puyok, a seasoned campaigner as well, Deputy Dean in UNIMAS. Yang Berhad, please take the floor. Thank you very much.
Hello.
He was just appointed 1.5 months ago, I think, Assistant Minister, although seasoned campaigner as well in Kuala Lumpur.
Thank you very much, Dato Sri, Moderator, for this session. I would like to say also thank you so much to the KSI for inviting me here to be with you to share my thoughts and my own observations as the future of Sarawak, what's next, what lies ahead. I would say future is fantastic, and our experience. For those who are here for the first time in Sarawak, welcome to Sarawak, and I hope you enjoy Sarawak. I would like to present some of my slides as to go on as we discuss. For Sarawak, we are very fortunate, very blessed with peace and harmony throughout. And I would like to share Malaysia, but we have Malaysia. Malaysia, if you look up, we have a Malaysia flag, we have Sabah flag, we have Sarawak flag. This is what we have in Sarawak. If you take out Kedah, we are as big as Peninsular Malaysia. Next, please. Unfortunately, we still have in our midst, we do not know about Sabah and Sarawak well. For 31st of August, just last month, just few days ago, we have a channel talking about Sarawak, talking about Malaysia, talking about Sabah. And they put Sabah as Sarawak. And then we have Sarawak being labeled as Sabah. This is live, Channel 8. This will tell people of Sarawak and Sabah and Peninsula that Sabah is Sarawak and Sarawak is Sabah. And what more to those visitors from outside? They are really confused. Yeah. Then if you look at the next one, the by-election in Sandakan, they put Sandakan at the back, the flag of Sarawak. This is what we have. This is LTM1. And this is important for us Malaysians, especially those in Peninsula, that there are people in the media. They are telling the whole world, people who are watching, what is Malaysia? What is Malaysia in Peninsula? What is Sabah and Sarawak? I think this one, number one, is very important. Because we are sending confusing messages or wrong messages to people outside Sarawak and also to those people who are in West Malaysia Peninsula. Yeah. Next, please. Now, for us, Independence Day is very important. Now, if we look at these 3 dates, 31st of August 1957, that will be the day when it's Independence Day for Federation of Malaya. For Sarawak, we always say 22nd July 1963. We are looking at de facto independence of Sarawak. And that's why we have now a public holiday. The third day, this is important, 16 September 1963. That is what we call Malaysia Day. Formation of Malaysia. We are only 56 years old. And history books always tell us that Sarawak and Sabah joined Malaysia. But looking at these dates, definitely cannot be right. Sarawak, Sabah, Federated States of Malaya, and Singapore at that time, we formed Malaysia. The word is form Malaysia. Next, please. Of course, we talk about the Malaysia Agreement. That's how it's referred to. Next page, please. The reports by the International Government Committee. Next, please. I'm going through all this very fast because in this, they talk about what obligations of federal government, state government, the list under federal, the list under Sarawak. What are the things that Sarawak government entitled to under the Malaysia Agreement, under the Global Commission, under International Government Committee report? What are the special rights for Sarawak? First and foremost, of course, the immigration autonomy, financial affairs, state matters, the state land, forestry, all this belongs to Sarawak. Now, Sarawak, if you look at the land size, we have wonderful amount of acres of land to be developed. Yeah. Next, please. Now, when Malaysia was formed, if you read this one, do we know what we are going in for? Will the promises help to them be realized? We may soon pass by. Our children and grandchildren will perhaps one day ask us to account for. At that time, in 1963, did we make such a decision? I do feel that if we want to be free and independent, there is no reason why we must join up with another country which is already independent. The terms that have been made known to us in my submission are not conducive to true independence of Sarawak. It is nothing but an integration of a country, Sarawak, into the Federation of Malaya. That was done by the late Tan Sri Dato Anwar Stephen Yong, the founder of this party, Sarawak United Party. I am in that party. Next, please. Now, we need to go into the Global Commission. What was then discussed? It says, Malaysia should be regarded by all concerned as an association of partners, combining in common interests to create a new nation, but retaining their own individualities. If any idea were to take root that Malaysia would involve a takeover of the Borneo territories by the Federation of Malaya and the submersion of individualities of Sabah and Sarawak, Malaysia would not, in my judgment, be generally accepted and successful. That was the statement made by Lord Cooper in his report. Next, please. Now, Sarawak, we move on. We talk about Sarawak autonomy. That was done by the late Chief Minister Tan Sri Adina Satem. He said, we did not cease to be a British colony controlled by London, just simply to be controlled by another power. And therefore, we must insist on our own autonomy. And that's how the present moment, the unhappiness feelings on the ground coming out. That's voices of unhappiness. Move on, please. Thank you. Now, of course, we have recently the MA negotiation committees. We have the Malaysia Agreement Steering Committee formed on the 10th of October by the federal government, led by our Prime Minister. And then in Sarawak, we have this Sarawak Consultative Committee formed on the 6th of November 2018 and was passed in our Sarawak Dun, please. Sarawak oil and gas. This is important for us, Sarawak. And this is the amount of production we have in the year 2017 since PDA, Petroleum Development Act 1974, until now. Sarawak has given or taken amount to federal coffer to the tune of RM 600 million. 600 over billion taken over. Next, please. Now, oil and gas. The Sarawak government has already passed the amended Oil Mining Ordinance 1958, and this ordinance was passed, and in the year 1958, the ordinance continued to be good law in Sarawak, even though the formation of Malaysia, because it is and still is at the moment our law, and has been amended, and it's important that with this oil mining ordinance being updated, then all those who operate any business in oil and gas, they need license from Sarawak. The government has formed this company called Petros. Yeah. Really? I have still so many. Oh, okay. Thank you. Oh, very quickly. We have Bing Biaga, the wonderful Bing Biaga, that territory. And, of course, we have so many other things. Probably as I move on, afterwards.
Once a politician hangs a mic.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Yang Berhad, Dato, Sebastian, Ting. That's some lessons of history for us, going back to 63 onwards. May I now invite the next speaker, Dr. Engineer Muhammad Abdul Karim bin Abdullah, Group CEO of Serba Dinamik. She will tell us about how his group will invest in Sarawak's future. Thank you very much.
Dr. Sri, Moderator, thank you very much. My fellow panelists, Dr. Tan Sri, Dr. Michael, Captain of the Industries, I would like to start with a very good wishes. Assalamu alaikum, a very good morning. So, I'm not a politician. I'm an entrepreneur and has been a businessman for the past 26 years. And I think I have some very good journey of experience to share, especially in the Q&A session later on. But let's go through initially the 8 minutes presentation that I would like to take this opportunity. The slides that you are looking at the moment shows Malaysia as a country is ranked number 3 within the Asian country. And in terms of the GDP per capita of the ASEAN country, again, you will see that Malaysia is ranked number 3. Why Malaysia? Because at the moment, Sarawak is still together in the federations of Malaysia. Sarawak economic growth, as we have seen, extract from those figures. In 2017, the manufacturing sector share of GDP, including gas, increased about 4.7%, more than double of 2017. What it means here is Sarawak is a contributor to the nation, Malaysia, in terms of the GDP, and one of the significant contributor also. The next slide will show that in the latest statistic of GDP contribution, by the stat 2018, Sarawak is currently the third biggest economic contributor, where it contributed 9.7% of Malaysian national GDP after Kuala Lumpur, which is 16.1%, and Selangor 23.7%. So that is where Malaysia in terms, Sarawak in terms of its contribution to the Federation of Malaysia. The other aspect that I would like to touch on is not so much to show the bungalow, the wooden bungalow, but is to demonstrate that one of the unique features of the Sarawakian is the unity factor. We cannot deny that a lot of peninsular colleagues of mine came over to Sarawak, and one of the typical expressions that they have mentioned is they like Sarawak because they see that different races, different religion, and different background, they can come in together very nicely, talk very nicely, and they have a strong feeling of unity among them, regardless of what the background of the race, what the background of the religion, but they are very much united. And these slides actually took on to the Melanau ethnic. Again, if you see from the perspective of the religion, Melanau, some of them are Muslim, some of them are Christian, but as a family, they are fully very united, and they treat each other as a family member of its kind. So these particular unique features, for the past few years until now, is still being conserved and is still being maintained. And it is a very good indications and sign of prosperity moving forward. The economics aspect of it, if we extract some of the figures, more than 30 billion reserves to be put for infrastructure and other basic amenities to modernize the rural economies in Sarawak. My fellow politician will elaborate more on this. And of course, the other facts that is being extracted by one of the speech by Honorable CM, Dato Abanjo, Sarawak has succeeded in attracting about 13.76 billion investment and providing about 11,000 jobs opportunities in Bintulu alone. This is an extraction of his speech. From the research institution, MIDF research, Sarawak GDP is expected to grow 5%, which is larger than the national GDP of 4.7%. So again, it shows the contribution of Sarawak to the GDP of the Federation of Malaysia. And the last point, government has increased its development expenditure to 4.29 billion in 2017 for improving its infrastructure and potential in rural areas. Of course, this is still debatable, and more things to discuss through the further discussion later on. I also would like to take this opportunity as a starting point of this panel discussion, the Digitalization Initiative, where we have seen that Sarawak has set up SMA, Sarawak Multimedia Authority, a very smart move, a very right decisions to monitor and also to enhance and also to develop the multimedia capabilities in the state of Sarawak. Why this is important, ladies and gentlemen? If we look from a very successful country like Singapore, why people comes into Singapore? Because the infrastructure from the perspective of the digitalization technology is very well developed. If you go to Hong Kong, it's the same thing. And mention another country which is quite sensitive, but I just mentioned it. Israel is a very small country, but it's very strongly positioned globally. And if we make a research onto it, it is because of their capability in the digital technology. And people come to a country or to a locations where they can continuously communicate with their respective peers and so on in other part of the world. So what Sarawak has been doing is a right move, and it has to be supported. But there are challenges if we look from the implementation stage, which we can discuss further. We also would like to attract this all Kuching smart heritage. It's an ongoing project aimed to safeguard the city's historical heritage through digital technology. Again, I would strongly support this because it will give a more stronger attractions to foreign tourists into coming to the state of Sarawak. The agriculture sector, a sector which people cannot deny the importance of it, is talking about the entire change of the F&B, food and beverage. It's very important for the livelihood of everybody. And you will see that the state government of Sarawak is implementing a smart farming by using IoT, Internet of Things, to monitor the farming environment and condition to boost crop productivity. And Sarawak's first hydrogen fuel cell electric buses was also being established. A lot of critics and so on. Let's open up for discussion. And I have my view, which I will share together later on. The other initiative is this Sarawak methanol plant. Very smart move, a very good initiative in looking as a first step to develop the downstream activities of the oil and gas industry under the control and under the authority of the Sarawak government. So this was raised recently. In the future of Sarawak, I would like to put 3 points there. The digital economy initiative is the right move. It has to be supported by every structure or strata of the community, from the students level up to the career people community, to the entrepreneurs, the business world, through the political structure and strata of the states itself. Infrastructure and socio-economic development has to be done collectively by all the respective different thoughts and ethnic and also the background of the community. And I would like to share and throw out one very good suggestion that I think politicians, after the election, they should put their political thoughts a bit aside, come united in one platform to develop the states. So this will be very important to make the success of infrastructure and socio-economic development. And of course, innovative, creative opportunities, future leaders is very important, a very important subject to be further debated and discussed. So thank you.
Thank you, Datuk Karim, who is from Bintulu, where I spent 9 years of my childhood there, although I was born in Kapit, actually. Thank you very much. Now, may I invite Yang Berhad Dr. Kelvin, the MP for Bandar Kuching, to give his views. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Saudara Moderator. Thank you so much for having me. It's really an honor to share some of my thoughts here in this amazing conference to this amazing and distinguished crowd. So I really have a very short time. To give a mic to a politician is one of the biggest mistakes that most people do. But actually, let me share with you some of my thoughts, especially on issues that we need to reflect in context of policies, federal-state relations, in order to build a better Sarawak and Malaysia as a whole. The federal government, through the Prime Minister, I think in mid of this year, announced the whole Shared Prosperity Vision 2030, which will be the thrust of government policies and program in its bid to make Malaysia a developed, a dignified and sovereign nation, on top of the intention of ensuring every rakyat regardless of race, religion, demographics, enjoy the economic benefits and prosper together in a fairer and equitable manner. I think this vision, in principle, in wordings itself, is something good, especially in order to correct the growth or the development inequality, not just among races, as I said, or communities, but also the demographics inequality, especially in the context of Sabah and Sarawak. There have been many specific meetings among the cabinet, beyond the normal cabinet meetings, in order to strategize, to plan, and to commit to this vision itself. And this shows actually the seriousness of the federal government to implement this vision. Of course, the million-dollar question for us here in Sarawak is, where do Sarawak stand and position itself within the whole vision of this shared prosperity? For it to really capture the imaginations of Sarawakians, this shared prosperity vision needs to clearly show or depict Sarawak's share of the prosperity and how it will help to contribute to a better Sarawak. And this, of course, does not only mean the quantity or resources allocated to Sarawak, which I am for one, we need more, but also Sarawak's standing and powers within the Federation itself. Just now, my learned colleague YB Sebastian gave us a very good overview of the history of the formation of Malaysia and also the special position Sabah and Sarawak enjoy within the Federation. But you see, one of those pertinent questions will be reflected at the results at the recently concluded MA63 Special Cabinet Committee meeting, which is report going to be tabled, if I'm not mistaken, to the Cabinet to address certain pertaining legal issues to MA63 as well as state-federal relationships. This, of course, includes different things: devolution of powers, certain autonomies, and, of course, a review of legal and constitutional grants under Article 112D, which has not been reviewed since the 70s. So I'm very optimistic. Actually, I'm pretty sure this clause will be reviewed. On top of that, I'm aware that certain federal ministries has actually made visits to Sarawak to discuss on the technicalities on the devolution of powers, which were traditionally under the federal. Now certain powers will be devolved to the state. I'm now not at liberty to review which ministry yet, but we will hope for the official announcement. Of course, the big question now is the readiness and to the extent the ability of the state to handle this responsibility. Again, I am not questioning the competency of the state civil service, but rather the readiness to take upon responsibilities that were traditionally under the federal government. See, this is a good direction. I'm all for it. However, all this big national development, all these big buzzwords on vision, on shared prosperity, all this will be meaningless if the people are living in poverty and marginalized or sidelined. So actually this brings me to my first point, that was introduction, of what I term today as banana skins. That for me, the tripartite relationship between the federal government, the state government, and also the private sector, we need to reflect upon, find a proper nexus of collaboration to properly address these issues. Why I call them banana skins is because if it's handled properly, we can step on it, slide and glide and gracefully like an ice skater. But if we're not handled properly, we will fall face down like a big fat tape. So, of course, number one, banana skin. As mentioned just now, addressing poverty and income inequality is very important. Almost 5 decades ago in Malaysia, we as a nation adopted the NEP. The NEP had 2 prongs, one of which was the eradication of poverty as a means towards attaining national unity. Of course, as a result, official estimates put out by the government indicated that there are 0.4% of households, numbering about 27,000 households that remain below the national poverty line. This estimate has been called into question by the UN, and rightly so, because in my opinion, this statistic is delusional and cannot be used as a basis for planning and allocation of resources. That is why I believe that a proper methodology had to be in place, and a replacement of a more updated, comprehensive, multi-dimensional poverty index needs to be introduced, which takes into account demographic factors, education, health, standard of living, to provide a clearer picture of the socio-economic needs of our society. See, poverty is not a topic that Sarawak can ignore. As we may boast, and rightly so, of the amazing economic growth and how we have contributed, number 3, contributed to the GDP in our country. and having healthy reserve, rich natural resources, land and timber. But we also share the not-so-proud statistic of having one of the highest, if not highest, amount of e-kasih recipients, which is poor, and also 7 out of the 10 poorest districts in the whole of Malaysia. And this should not be limited to the rural, but also of urban, because I foresee urban poverty as a bigger problem as more and more urban migration is happening. So I feel very intimidated talking about poverty, especially with Prof. Madeline here. She's the expert in the topic. But while poverty incidence people have talked about it, but one issue I want to bring is the income, or what I call vertical inequality, that receive far less attention. You see, the calculation of Gini coefficient in our country has actually showed skewed distributions. Fact of the matter is Malaysia's income growth success is an unequal one. Based on a study by Muhammad Abdul Khalid and Li Yang from Paris School of Economics, the country's richest 10% control nearly half of the total income shared from 2002 to 2014. So basically, it shows that there is very rich people which continue getting rich, but yet the wealth is not properly distributed. So you see, to me, this points to improper governance, abuse, or even corruption. And that's where the government needs to look at correcting this imbalance in wealth distribution, reduce disparity between the income classes, ethnic groups, territories, and of course, supply chain. So while it's very convenient for us to gravitate towards pushing for more allocations, pushing for more money in this Sarawak share of prosperity, but I think one of the more important questions we need to ask is whether there are good governance measures, anti-corruption steps in order to make sure these allocations do not benefit selected elites, but reach to its intended target to elevate intergenerational poverty among our people. Okay, very quick. Number 2, as mentioned by my colleague just now as well, is Sarawak ready for me, the most disruptive revolution, which is Revolution 4.0. This is more disruptive than its predecessors because the introduction of AI, digitalization, IoT will actually bring, it has a potential to bring Sarawak to a very good future, but it also has a potential for us to leave us further behind, especially if our people across urban and rural people do not accept or kind of internalize the importance of it. You see, I'm a firm believer that tech money is actually the new oil money. And how we tap into that, even the traditional industries such as agriculture, will determine our position not just in regional but global market. Of course, the limitations we have in Sarawak is facilities, infrastructures, and even people's readiness and acceptance. Because if not handled properly, actually this may further widen the urban-rural divide, where the urbanites will probably benefit more for the potential in tech, but the rural continue to be left behind. So this is where the tripartite of federal, state, and private sector needs to play its roles to push for more emphasis on this education, upskilling, reskilling, and lifelong education. Number 3, really quick, and I'll end with this, is the whole issue of over-protectionalism. As we progress forward in the future, one of the things we need to look in Sarawak is whether any policies, especially those driven by sentiments, should not create more harm, not just to an industry, but the people at large. I am all for protection of our local industry, but such protectionism should be always reasonable, not at the expense of promoting monopoly, stifling market, or even excessive profiteering of any companies. I'm aware, especially with big development budget by the state government last year, that certain protectionism clauses are inserted and specially worded into tender projects. And this, in principle, is good. It helps protect local industries, but in certain industries, especially certain materials, this may cause the promotion of monopoly, which run the risk of profiteering, and at the end of the day, we the people have to bear the cost of higher costs of that project. So, again, I stress, I support the protectionism of local industry, but it should not protect monopoly. In my view, such clauses should be reconsidered if there is currently only one company that is supplying such material in the state to prevent monopoly, or to introduce or adopt a proposal to have a cap on the percentage of profit, differences of profit in comparison to other competitors even outside the state. So these are the few banana skins on the top of my head that I feel the tripartite needs to properly address. One of the things I would love to see the tripartite committee form within the federal, state, and private sector is a Borneo economic committee to discuss and charter the economic direction of the Greater Borneo, which of course includes Indonesia, especially with the announcement of the shifting of capital Indonesia to Kalimantan. For me, this is potentially a game changer for us economically in terms of trade, knowledge exchange, but if we did not prepare properly, such shift may have adverse effects on us, especially it may exacerbate brain drain, where our children, the top of Sarawakians, move to Kalimantan for jobs, just like how Johor is affected by Singapore. So in conclusion, with all that said, I know global markers, global economy forecasts may not be so encouraging, but what seems as bad news is actually good news for those who are prepared. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Yang Berhad. Dr. Madeline, Berma, poverty being closest to your heart, maybe you can address us, where did we go wrong in after spending hundreds of millions again in anti-poverty measures, we still are off target. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Dato Sri. Thank you so much. You know, a lot of times when I stand in front of an audience like this, everyone will associate me with poverty, which is kind of nice, a branding. But on the other hand, I bear the burden of having to explain why we have been spending so much money. All the ministries have been involved in poverty alleviation, and yet our poverty is one of the highest. Okay? So never mind. I will answer that question later. Now, how I intend to do this today is that I will cover 5 major topics, right? If they say, if you don't give the mic to the politician, so don't give the mic to an IBAN politician and an educator. The first thing that I would like to discuss today is on our economy. Number 2, politics. Number 3, social cultural development. Number 4, I will look into how we want to manage expectations. This is a big issue, I think. And the last one, how I foresee Sarawak within the context of Malaysia. Number 1, economy. I must admit, having listened to all my colleagues, our distinguished panelists here, Sarawak is one of the country that I can say, or rather, I don't know, country, state, negara, or whatever you want to call it. But basically, let us look at first, when you look as an economist, first you have to look at investment. Investment-wise, we are doing very well. Now, we heard just now how we hear all the different areas that investment are coming in. In fact, if you look at the data, I in the last few years, I've been looking at economic data. We have one of the highest in terms of our investment. We are number 3 after Selangor and Johor. So that's not too bad, right? So number 1 will be Johor with 30.5 billion. Selangor is 18.9 and Sarawak is number 3, 8.6 billion. So that's really good. I love data because statistics don't... Yes. What is it? Oh. When you have a privilege of... what happened? Oh. I'm being put on a pedestal. Okay, thank you. Maybe because this is a bit too high. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. But I'm sure they can hear my voice. All right? So number 1, investment. Yes, Sarawak, we have been attracting the kind of investment that we want. So that's something that we can be proud of. It does show that Sarawak has the right, what we call the fundamentals in place, or else nobody wants to come here. Except lately, last week I came. Haze was really something that, you can't even have your selfie. Right. Number 2, in terms of the trade. Of late, I noticed that our export and our, the trade balances, there's been a trend whereby it is kind of an up, down trend. So meaning to say inconsistent in terms of the trend. It's not like upward or just downward. So, but since 2014, there has been a downward trend in terms of our trade surpluses. What it means is that our import is getting higher and our export is getting less. But it's just a trend. Don't worry. These are all statistics. As I was just about to say, statistics don't lie. Statisticians do. It's true, That's what we teach in university. You look at our students, when they find that the results are not good, they will turn it around, they switch it there, so that the R-squared will become very high, and their model is perfect. Then they pass the exam. That's what they always think, without realizing, theoretically, that is already wrong. So that is in terms of trade. So another thing that I wanted to look at in terms of economy is, of course, if you look at in terms of our import and export, what is worrying is that I see a trend in terms of we are getting a bit large in terms of our import of food. If you look at our content of import, so I would have thought that Sarawak would be quite self-sufficient in some areas, but I think this is something that we should look into. Okay, that is import. Now, the next thing that I would like to look into is, so the economy is very strong. So another area that I will look later, and which is very much close to my heart, is on socio-economic development. Factor number 2 that I want to discuss briefly only, because I'm not a politician, politics. I love what is happening right now. We have a change of government. Yes, we are hoping for something different after 60 years. I see that in Sarawak, GPS now is no longer the ruling government in terms of the federation. So Sarawak has a lot to say. We need to have a very strong state government. Although, YB Kelvin, I know you are caught in between, one being a Sarawakian, on the other hand being in the parliament. So that's really good. We need to have very strong voices in parliament. So that is really something that I look forward to, because I do believe in balances in terms of being a supporter of the existing government, or on the other hand, you need to have a strong voice in terms of the opposition. But be a good opposition, not just finding fault. If the government is doing something right, we say they are doing something right. If they're not doing something right, that's when you really knock them out. And being in Iban, if you need to sumpit them, you sumpit them, you do. Okay, that's being an Iban, okay? So we don't just praise them because whatever it is. So I do hope our YBs here, they will do a good job in terms of putting our state in perspective. Now, that is politics. Number 3 that I would like to look into is socio-cultural. Okay, there are 5 areas that I want to look. Number 1, environment. Sarawak is not something that I want to be proud of. I studied poverty since 1980s. I retired in 2018. And what did I see? There has not been improvement in terms of our environmental protection. Yeah, there are laws in place. Now I am working, just like I was being told that, I was being introduced as SUHAKAM Commissioner. The things that we receive, the complaints that we receive are mostly related to environmental degradation. Number 2, land issues. Number 3, education. So these are issues that we in Sarawak must look into carefully. Because if we don't look at these things with really, with real scrutiny and with deep, each and every one of us, put aside our politics. We were sitting down just now in the room. We said, is there any way that we can depoliticize education? Because education in Malaysia is so highly politicized. If you need an Iban lady to tell you this, I will tell you straight right out. I was in the Jawatankuasa, Jawatankuasa Kajian Dasar Pendidikan Negara, okay? The things that we found out, do you know that we have 11 streams in terms of our education? National, sekolah jenis kebangsaan, jenis kebangsaan, Cina, Tamil, blah, 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 Tafiz, state religious school, altogether we have 9. I think we will win the next World Guinness record for having the highest, all right? Right? So that's number 1. Okay, in terms of education. Another thing about education, it has always been, this is open, it's not even a secret, it was reported. Our kids go for 12 years of education, but in reality, they only have 9 real in terms of knowledge. So this is something that we really need to look into. Let's not talk about Sekolah Daif. Federal and state are quarreling over what is Sekolah Daif. So they go into the semantics of what is Daif. My God, they spend more time discussing how to define Daif than really addressing the problem. One moment, YB Mazli come here, tell, this is not Daif enough. Daif is there is a category. Then our YB from the state minister said, no. Definition of Daif is like this, The school are still in Daif position, despite the semantics of it. But if you're doing your PhD, it's quite okay. Now, the issue of environment is related to education. And then another thing that, I've covered education. The other one was, the other thing is poverty. Every one of us was shocked. Many of us were shocked, not every one of us. Many of us were shocked when Professor Philip Alston, the United Nations, he came. He came only 10 days. Interestingly, he came 10 days, and there was so much buzz about him being in Malaysia. Everybody quoting him. The first person who reacted to him was our YB minister, Azmin. Suddenly, YB Azmin said, Philip Aston is not saying the right thing. I said, come on, you have to be realistic. The poverty line is, to me, I'm not concerned about poverty line. It is exactly about statistics. At the end of the day, we will be fighting whether it is 4%, whether it's 4.1% or 0.4%, blah, 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 blah. The reality is that there are poor people down there. So as YV Kelvin, we went to this place in his area, and I'm so thankful. YV Kelvin, the moment he received my WhatsApp, actually he WhatsApped me. Oh my God, you don't get YBs to WhatsApp you, When the only time YB will WhatsApp you is that when you say something wrong. But this time he WhatsApp me, Dr. Madeline, he said, is there anything that I can do? So we make some plans. So we visited an area, this urban poverty area. So thank you, YB. Yeah? So we need politicians, right? Regardless, no, I'm not praising him because I need some Datuk-ship or whatever. No, he doesn't have that power. I'm just telling that the moment that we have YBs who just respond because it's all poverty. Because to me, poverty, you really have to address poverty. Now, the biggest challenge for us in Sarawak now that I'm working in SUHAKAM, poverty will start with what? No documentation. Unlike Sabah, documentation issue is a different issue in Sabah. It's about probably foreigners trying to, get documented. In the case of Sarawak, it is our very old people. The Penan who live in the border there, 7 or 8 days walk to find them. They do not understand why do you need documentation. Without documentation, they cannot have identity cards. When they don't have identity cards, they cannot go to school. They cannot have all the facilities that we Malaysians or we Sarawakians can have. That is the beginning of intergenerational poverty. See that bell? No problem. That's why I don't want to use on the PowerPoint. So, the issue of poverty, intergenerational, the thing that if you know any of your relatives, if you know any of your friends who do not have documentation, please come to SUHAKAM. We will try to assist you because that is one of the mandat given to SUHAKAM. So that's the issue of poverty. Okay, in terms of data, I have been accused of giving false data. I was the culprit who there was an interview, and I was the one who wrote, Sarawak inwardly rich, outwardly poor, or something like that. I can't remember. 7 out of 10 poorest districts in Malaysia is in Sarawak. We want to say nothing happened, it's up to us. But for me, as a student of poverty and as a lecturer of poverty, you need to recognize it is there. We cannot eradicate poverty, but we can alleviate. Meaning to say, poverty, there are 2 sides to it. One is absolute poverty, the other one is relative poverty. So what we are more concerned now, absolute poverty, you play with the line. The moment you put the line below, at the moment is 980, I'll take you, 980. Anybody below 980, you're considered poor. What happens if you turun that overnight? Just turun it to 200. I tell you, within 2 seconds, everybody no more poor. That's what Professor Jomo told me, how to do statistics. Okay. That is number 3. Okay, I'm also concerned about the loss of culture. I am very deeply concerned because in my trips to the rural areas, I've seen loss of this cultural heritage. Our people do not know how to weave anymore. Our people, look at me, I can't even speak Iban. I mean, I can speak the Iban on the street, but the real Iban, I cannot. I cannot write in proper Iban. I've lost it. Ask yourself, how can you call yourself an Iban if you don't even know how to speak Iban? You go to the rural areas, you find all the orang ulu, beautiful carvings, but where they bury the dead, the salong. Now with dams and all the mega projects, these have gone away. I'm wrapping up. Okay, the last one that I am concerned about is how do we manage expectations. The youth are getting more educated. The rural and urban divide is getting wider. And number 4 is, I am now in SUHAKAM. What do? I see people on death row. I interviewed them. 80% of them in death row are related to drugs. And the last point that I want to make is how do I see the future? But I leave this to you. I give you 4 scenarios. Number 1, business as usual. Trapped in misery. Or we are contented, but we are complacent. Number 3, we are in disarray, but our economy is okay. Then the last one, we are synergized and in harmony. So these 4 things. 1, we are trapped in misery. Or rather, what they say in the past is business as usual. The same government, the same people, and we do everything the same way. Number 2, we are contented, but we are complacent. Anyway, Sarawak is so rich. Why worry? Haze come, haze go, no problem. Number 3, we are disarrayed. Things are all jumbled up, but economy is okay. And the last one, that's something that I really hope for, is that economy is moving on. We are in progress. And most importantly, where we are so proud of, our state is in harmony. And with that, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Berma, Dr. Madeline. She's not a politician, but she speaks the longest. Now, the last speaker is Dr. Arnold Puyok of UNIMAS, academician. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dato. A very good morning, everybody. Thank you for inviting me to share my thoughts on this topic this morning. Well, the topic of my short presentation is Malaysian Agreement 1963 and federal-state relations. I think I need to get the... Okay, now, let's look at Malaysian Agreement 1963 because this is the thing that has always been debated, has been argued by many people, students, lecturers, or even researchers. But, of course, if you look at Sabah and Sarawak, when it comes to MX63, Malaysian Agreement 1963, most of the discussion on this topic are being dominated by our politicians. And when you look at the way they debate the issue, and most of the issues that they raise are very, very, what I would call as very academic in nature, quote unquote. For me, you see, we've been independent for so many years. We've been progressed as a nation for so many years. But it's quite sad that we are still debating about MX63. We are still debating about the year of our founding, and we are still debating about the document that's supposed to be telling us about the foundation of our country. It's okay for us to debate about MX63, but I think what is more important now is to shift our focus from the academic focus and to more focus on policy. I would like to see our YB to talk about MX63 from the perspective of how MX63, for instance, can help us to alleviate poverty, how MX63 can help decentralizing more powers from the federal to the state government of Sabah and Sarawak. So what we see now is more discussion on interpretation and perspective. One scholar will say a different thing about MX63, another scholar will have a different perspective, and so on and so forth. So as Dr. Madeline has rightly said just now, it is okay as long as we are not veering too much on our discussion, focusing on the academic aspect of it rather than the policy related to MX63. Now, of course, if we talk about MX63, a lot of people are trying to bring the issue of equal partnership. This was debated in Parliament recently. Is Sarawak one out of 3, or is Sarawak out of 1 out of 13, or is our status being downgraded, for instance? But a lot of people don't understand. In 1976, when the so-called status of Sarawak was downgraded, when you look at the federal constitution, the safeguards, the rights of Sarawak or even Sabah were intact. So I'm more worried if, for instance, the rights and safeguards for Sarawak are slowly eroded in the federal constitution. That's what worries me. I'm not worried too much whether or not this issue of equal partnership is resolved. I'm more worried about what rights are being granted for Sabah in the federal constitution, whether whether they will continue to be safeguarded or whether they will be attempt to erode those rights. Again, when we compare Sabah and Sarawak, for instance, in my opinion, Sarawak is more strategic in its struggle to implement MH63 because you have seen a lot of initiatives by the Sarawak government like uplifting the English language as the official language for Sarawak, introducing Sarawak Bank, introducing Sarawak Petros, and so on and so forth. I think even though it is still too early to see how these are going to benefit the people, but at least if you look at Sarawak has done quite good in terms of trying to bring MH63 to the ground level, trying to bring it to the policy level, rather than just focusing on the academic debate of MH63. Now, what is the federal attitude towards this issue? I think the way I look at it is that Tun Mahathir is a very nationalist in his outlook. That is why when it comes to autonomy, when it comes to decentralization of power, I think Tun Mahathir is more, perhaps like Anwar, is more cautious because Mahathir's main agenda for this nation, he tries to strengthen the federation. It doesn't mean that he neglects Sabah and Sarawak, but I think what is important for him to strengthen the federation and try to focus more on national integration and in this country. Anwar is more circumspect in his attitude. I remember once he said autonomy is okay, but not autonomy to give more power to local leaders so that they can involve in, so that they can use their power to for their own political purposes. Okay, now that is MH63. Then we come to another important topic of federal-state relations. I think it's very, very important, it's very crucial for the state to remain in good terms with the federal government because in a federation, a lot of people don't understand the concept of federation. They think that federation is only one set of government trying to dominate the other governments under the federation. The principle of federation allows two sets of government to exist. If you look at our federal constitution, of course, something has to be changed there, whereby the federal government must decentralize more powers to the state government of Sabah and Sarawak. That is the principle of federation. Of course, when Mahathir was the prime minister, before he became prime minister for Malaysia, he tried to centralize power because Mahathir believed in strong government, strong central leadership. But that happened at the expense of Sarawak's and Sabah's autonomy or uniqueness in the federation. So I'm glad that YB Kelvin has presented to us some of the initiatives that the government is trying to do in terms of giving more power to Sabah and Sarawak. Hopefully, those initiatives will be implemented soon for the betterment of the federation. Now, there is always this issue of regionalism in policy making and implementation. The one key advantage of regionalism is that when policymakers want to make policy, they have to look into the uniqueness of the different regions. Like, for instance, Sabah and Sarawak. You have to identify the issues that are special to Sabah and Sarawak before you implement or before you formulate policies. But on the other hand, there is this disadvantage. If too much of regionalism is put into the policy making and implementation. For instance, if national leaders, federal lawmakers want to implement policies and issues are of national concern, of course there is always this clash with state leaders or with local leaders. So I think this is something which needs to be addressed. Dr. Madeline talked about the balance between national and state interests. Now overall, how do I look at it? It was quite, I use the word cozy under Tun type. It was a relatively very stable state government under the federation. Then it became quite contentious and diplomatic under Adnan. He tried to be confrontational at the same time. but diplomatic also. I think Abang Jo is trying to appear as a leader who is cordial to the federal government, but at the same time, I think he also wants to show to the federal government that he means business when it comes to Sarawak's rights. I'm going to go very fast, Dato. Now, what we need to do now, I think, is we have to create a new narrative. I call it a new narrative of MX63. I think Babi Kelvin excellently explained this, the concentration of administration, devolution of power. I don't want to go more into that. More resilient and effective federal structure. That's what we want to see. Another point which I want to point out is increased context between federal and state leaders. It's okay if state and federal leaders come together and conduct yearly conference to understand what are the issues that happen at the state and at the federal level and how those issues can be solved. Okay, almost there. Oops, okay. Well, overall, Sarawak has a lot of potentials to be developed further. It's already mentioned by Dr. Karim. Cultural solidarity and identity is quite evident here. I have the privilege to travel to many places around the world, but I think Sarawak shows that multiculturalism can be promoted and can be preserved. Relatively, Sarawak is quite stable in terms of its politics. Again, as mentioned by the panelists just now, Sarawak can be a catalyst for growth in Borneo, given the relocation of Indonesia's capital city. Well, I think that's it. If you have any question or comments, you can always email or call me. Thank you very much.
Dr. Arnold. Maybe open the next 10 minutes for question and answer before we adjourn for the opening ceremony. Anyone wants to also, among the panelists, wants to wind up? Why not? Please welcome some question. Yeah, please. Just introduce yourself as usual.
Okay, my name is Alfonso from Human Rights Commission of Malaysia, or SUHAKAM. I want to ask this question to Dato Muhammad Karim Abdullah. Okay, what are the challenges with integrating and embedding human rights in business, at least from your point of view? Thank you.
Human rights in business.
Yeah, testing. Wow, out of all the panelists, you targeted me.
Our forum is on business today.
I believe it this way. Yeah. Serba Dinamik, the company that one of the company that I'm heading at the moment is a company that is built up from scratch. I started off a company way back about 26 years ago, only with me and my secretary, and I do not have a privilege of political connections and so on. So what I would like to say here is, for any entity, whether you are politicians, whether you are lecturer, whether you are economists and so on, the foundations is very important. Similarly, to a house, if you want to build it, it can withstand all the challenges and so on. The foundation has to be strong. So what I'm trying to say here is, for what we are doing is, as a company, we put very important emphasis on technology. That technology either we build up in-house or we go out to acquire it and improve it internally. So with that, we will have that foundations to be used as a means to move forward the organizations. And I would like to take this opportunity also to share some of the things of the topics that we are discussing today. As enterprise, we feel that we have something to contribute to the country. Number one, when we do jobs or contracts overseas, we make sure that the Malaysian flag is being taken care of, meaning that the performance, the deliveries, the attitude, the culture, and so on has to be meeting the required standards globally. And then, of course, secondly, on the country frontier, we have this CSR, corporate social responsibility. We are starting to move in a sizable manner at the moment in terms of contributing it back to the society, not jeopardizing the profitability that we have committed and promised to our investors. And in a way, sometimes people think that you are an enterprise, business-oriented entity, you should limit those kinds of exposure and those kind of contributions. But our argument is this: when we enlarge and position ourselves in a bigger manner in terms of corporate social responsibility, it's a sales and marketing and the branding initiative. By whatever means, we have to spend that money also. So in another way, we are getting two objectives to be secured or achieved in one efforts. So to cut short the explanation, foundations is very important. Secondly, we always have to take care of the name of the country. And thirdly, the contribution back to the society. Thank you.
I hope that answers the question. We give a clap to Datuk Karim for being starting from scratch, from zero. His company is now a multi-billion-dollar entity. Yeah. Thank you. Another question, please. Maybe the next 5 minutes. Yeah. Or kalau tak ada soalan, maybe we'd like to wrap up with the panel speakers. YB first. We would like to speak.
I guess let me try to put my thoughts. I think at the end of the day, I think we all want the best for Sarawak. I think in order for the best of Sarawak, I think that we have to look at things holistically on all angles. I totally agree with my distinguished panel that a lot of times, a lot of the conversations that we have currently, especially in terms of direction of not just the country but Sarawak, has been overly politicized. And then the conversation of policies has not been ground-based, but rather rhetoric. So I personally want to see more substantial policies, more substantial political debates happening even in Parliament. Because while this may not be attractive to a lot of people, even young people especially, but I have a personal agenda, a personal cause to fight. I want to see politics made boring again. That means politics that is been more focused on policies and also directions for the countries. That's why I cannot stress the importance of the tripartite collaborations of the federal, the state, as well as the private sector in ensuring the direction of Sabah, Sarawak, Malaysia as a whole, and its positioning in the global market. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now,
not too much politics.
No more. In addition to the decision by the President of Indonesia of moving the proposed capital to Kalimantan, I think this will augurs very, very well for Sarawak. And because this is for Sarawak, in that case, it will be so near to Sarawak and Sabah, and potential is wonderful. And if we look at Binyaga, the southern Philippines, Sarawak, Sabah, and Indonesia, and that part itself is also very good. Now, if we can talk about the cabotage policy, if we can reduce that, meaning that ships that come into Malaysia do not have to go to Port Klang first, and after that, come to Sarawak and Sabah. That cost is additional. Sarawak people and Sabah people had been paying on this. In addition to that, the flights. It's the same thing. International flights that come to...
economic spillover.
It is. You look at a flight coming off from Australia. They have first to fly down to Kuala Lumpur. And after that, then they can come to Kuching or to KK. And that is additional cost. And definitely not right for Sarawak and Sabah. Unfair to Sarawak and Sabah. Yeah, thank you.
I think we take a break. Thank you very much for listening, and we once again show our appreciation to the panel speakers by giving them what they have spoken about.